What's up, guys? Today's May 2nd, 2020. Hope everyone's doing well, or at least as well as you could be doing in these times. In this video, I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach. We are going to look at a few different news stories that I want to decode. All of these stories related to coronavirus and having been published in the last couple days. But before I do that, I've been getting a lot of questions about the ciphers that I use, which ones to use, which ones I think might be more significant, and also some questions related to the origin of some of these ciphers. And while I don't have the best detailed answers for all of them, we are going to talk about the primary ones, the ones I consider to be most significant. And we're also going to be glancing at some statistics as far as which ciphers that I talk about in my decodes. And of course, when I started decoding, one of the major criticisms I had was that I was using too many ciphers, and that was very true. I was finding things that I think were either unintentional or coincidental. And I definitely tried to narrow it down to the base 4 ciphers. And again, we'll look at the numbers in a little bit. Actually going to put those on the screen. What I did is I looked at every blog post I've made in the last month and essentially counted how many times I shared a find in each of the major ciphers that I use in my decodes. And I think you'll find that, for the most part, I'm using the alphabetic order, the reduction cipher, keeping it in the base 4, and then we're also going to spend a little time talking about Jewish or Latin gematria. Another criticism I occasionally get is that the Jewish cipher should be called Latin gematria, and I do believe there's some validity to that. Clearly, the cipher is based in the Latin language. However, multiple sources that I saw when I was first learning gematria called it Jewish gematria, and again, controversial, but nonetheless, it's one that we've become familiar with over time. So we start with the alphabetic order. Now, before I get into this, I do want to say I'm going to be trying to keep an eye on the chat during this video. I'm a pitiful multitasker, so I can't promise that I'm going to catch all of these questions or comments that are on there. But I will certainly do my best. So we start with the simple alphabetic order, and to me, this is the most significant, the most logical cipher, and the easiest to put in front of someone at first glance. The values of this cipher are very simple. It's the alphabetic order numbered 1 through 26. No one believes the alphabet has no order that I know of. Everyone understands it has a start and a finish. So this to me is the most basic cipher, and it even explains the practice in full. It's called Simple English Gematria, or Gematria. The words simple, English, and Gematria sum to 74, all in the alphabetic order. And this is a biblical code. We might later get into, the 74 of Jesus. Lucifer, which a lot of people don't understand, use incorrectly, also 74. And we'll talk about how gematria is also a form of divination, akin to that of the tarot. And I don't think I've really ever talked about tarot cards on this channel before, but I 100% believe there is power to the symbols of the tarot, and that readings can reveal truths about yourself in the future. I've had far too many bizarre occurrences. The first card I ever drew out of a full deck was the Gemini. The Lover's card, which is ruled by Gemini, which is my birth sign. And that's just an example. Another thing I wanted to mention before I forget is that recently there's a new Discord. Now, I've had my own Discord my own Gematrinator Discord for quite some time. And, I've actually been considering whether or not to end the Discord because I was really, we don't have many people moderating it, and I wasn't too thrilled with the quality of all the finds. On the other hand, I've made some great connections and found and learned some wonderful things on there too. So I never really wanted to shut it down, but I believe it's Alex over at involved with Gematria Effect News and Zach Hubbard, and they started their own Discord. And this one is a lot more robust than mine. Mine only has 6 or 7 channels. This is linked down below in the description. You'll see the link at the end of the video. Also from my website, you can get there. Zach's is going to be a little bit more robust. It's specific to regions, certain topics and categories. So for those of you who are looking to reach out and find people to connect with, especially now if you find yourself losing even more friends or family who disagree with your stance on what's happening in the world, you know, these are always good places to find that camaraderie. And I've gotten a lot of satisfaction from helping bring people together through this knowledge, and as we all learn a little bit more. So, just wanted to mention that. I will drop a link in the description after I finish this video for the Discord. Okay, so we have the alphabetic order 1 through 26. Again, very simple to explain, the most basic. And I truly believe that this is the most significant cipher in this language. And there could be debate as to whether or not there even is a most significant. Perhaps some will say that they all have significance of somewhat equal value. But the next one would be full reduction. And, Zach definitely says this is the most significant as far as I'm aware. A lot of people think that, and that might be true. My opinion on that is that it may be because the cipher produces smaller numbers, so therefore the odds of more alignments go up than they would from the normal alphabetic order. But what I'd like to point out is that in my blog, I focus mainly on the ordinal ciphers. Notice how over a quarter of every Gematria find that I post comes from the standard alphabetic order, 26.5%. And that's actually over 100 more than reduction, which is down at 18.4%. And you would think this would be the other way around, because reduction is, like I said, it yields smaller numbers, more frequently aligns with the date numerology. And then you have the reverse alphabetic order. And the way I see it, the further you get from the basic alphabetic order, the less significant the cipher may be. So here with reverse, we have to obviously flip the alphabetic order around. And you'll notice I only have about half of my finds in reverse listed as I do in ordinal. And it's similar in reverse reduction, a little more than half of the times that I use reduction when I'm decoding. So, and what I'm doing is I kind of treat the ciphers similarly, but it's clear to me that there's more patterns and more that stands out in these ordinal and reduction ciphers. Just checking on the chat, Sandra had a comment about the website, how it displays misspelled words. I do understand that. That's because it was taking every single input for a very long time. So what she's talking about is the match function on the website. If you click the match button, you get a table of results with similar Gematria finds, and there's really no filter to that. So you're going to get entries of all kinds, shapes, and sizes, and the database was not, it was obviously too large for me to manage, and I wasn't sure how to build a great way to manage it, and ultimately it got corrupted, so that's why the website occasionally has errors now. So again, I'm not really a programmer by trade. I kind of built the website till it works, and now when things go awry, I get confused. So, let's continue. Now, again, the next cipher that we look at in the base 4 is the reverse alphabetic order. And I just want to point out how these ciphers are related, because this is something that's very important, and I think not enough people really understand when they're looking at Gematria. So what I just did is I added the numerology of these numbers to the table. So what we have is reduction, and then the numbers will stop reducing if it arrives at a master number. So with tarot, 7 plus 4 is 11. 11 is a master number, so it stops there. This is also the same numerology as 2. So when we reduce 20, we get the number 2. 1 plus 1 is 2. When this occurs, we know that in the reverse alphabetic order, it will always be 7, because these numbers, what the reduction value of the forwards way and the reduction value of the backwards way, will always reduce to 9. And this is based on the alphabet being 26 letters. So if we instead use a word like keyboard, notice how keyboard equals 81. 8 plus 1 is 9. That means in reverse, it must also reduce to 9. Of course, this changes if you add numbers in there. Then this all falls apart. But as long as you're using letters, this rule will always apply. Here we see the word alphabet. 65 and 29 both reducing to 2 or 11. That means in the reverse, because 9 minus 2 is 7, we know that it'll reduce to 7. Someone asking which cipher Corona sums to 666. As far as I know, it does not sum to 666 in any of the ciphers that I use. However, notice how this is 6 letters, Corona, and it sums to 66 using the alphabetic order. So to me, that's the very clear 666 connection. So death being 20, you could say that death equals 2, but, then, you can align the number 2 with anything. You can make a blog post linking death to anything. So, 20 to me is the number there. Yeah, if your screen is stuck, it must be a problem with your internet. Hopefully my internet survives this. It doesn't always do that. So we have the reverse alphabetic order, and this is explained very simply. It's just the alphabetic order flipped around. So instead of going A to Z, we go Z to A. So the letter M, the 13th letter, we know that in reverse, it's going to sum to 14. So for every letter that you type, you're going to get a total of 27 when you add the ordinal and reverse ordinal ciphers. Now, some decoders will put out words and phrases and, say that if you sum everything up, if you add 155 to 56 to 142 to 70, that there's significance behind that number. Maybe there's some times where that is true, but essentially the reason I don't like that and the reason that I don't ever mention that is because what you're essentially creating is a cipher where every letter is worth 36 except I and R, which are then worth 45. Then you have that cipher, and it just, I don't know, I feel like you could do a lot there. And it's very easy to get to the number 666 that way. A lot of people do that. As far as the reverse reduction value, then I'll look at the chat again. Here we have the reverse alphabetic order simply with the rules of numerology. So this is the same thing we're doing with the reduction method, which maybe I could have explained greater. Notice how reduction is the same as the alphabetic order up through 9, and where it changes is J. And that's because J is a double-digit number. So here, using the rules of numerology, we're going to add all the digits together. So 1 plus 0 is 1, giving us our reduction value. As we move through the alphabet, this becomes more and more apparent. K, the 11th letter, 1 plus 1 equals 2, which is the reduction value. And this applies all the way through the end. The letter Z, 26, and then 8. 2 plus 6 is 8. Now here's the one kicker in the alphabet, and this is going to explain the S exception. So notice how S is the 19th letter. And this is where it gets a little complicated, right? Because you have to reduce this twice. So 1 plus 9 is 10. And then again, when you reduce it once more, you get the number 1. So when we reduce it once, this is why I call the cipher single reduction, because we're just reducing every letter once. And this leaves only one letter as a double-digit number. That would be S at 10. Every other letter only needs to be reduced once. With full reduction, we're taking the double-digit number from single reduction and reducing it all the way. looking back at the stats that I developed, so like I said, about 70% of everything that I mentioned on my blog comes out of these base 4 ciphers. This leaves 30% more, and of that, 18% is either in English Extended or Jewish Gematria. Notice how I actually share about 2.5 times more finds in Jewish Gematria than English Extended. This is a very significant cipher, one we'll talk about soon. And the S exception is tucked in here right as well at 3%. So of the 7 basic ciphers, the most significant ones, this alone makes up over 90% of what I share on my blog. And I will touch on these other ciphers. Some of these I really like. But again, I mean, they're not so significant. And even notice how high the count for Sumerian is at 33. This is primarily because we're going through the Corona crisis, and 666 is a huge number. This is the cipher that's said to unlock the number of the beast, as it multiplies the alphabetic order by 6. Okay, so again, the reverse reduction method, applying the same rules to the reverse order. If we use the letter G, which is 20, we reduce it down to 2. And same thing with A, 26, 2 plus 6 is 8. Now there is a reverse single reduction, and I barely ever use that, but I do think it's somewhat relevant. And instead of the letter S being 20, the letter H, or I'm sorry, 10, the letter H is 10, since that's the 19th letter in the reverse order. All right, now if you're familiar with my videos, you're used to seeing the Jewish Gematria cipher in this spot in the lower left of the calculator, and I place it here because I believe this is the most significant outside of the alphabetic order. And, you know, it doesn't look that way in the statistics because it's 12.7%. It's actually the 4th most popular cipher I use, but consider that Jewish Gematria gives us such larger numbers. So therefore, there should be fewer alignments in this cipher just based on the idea that we get much larger numbers. It's much less likely for us to get coincidental matches. However, in observing this cipher, it becomes very clear that there's something a lot more to it. So notice how I place this, you know, in my blog almost as often as the reverse alphabetic order, which yields much smaller numbers, and even more so than reversed reduction. There's a nifty website here called masoncode.com, and this points out the Latin or Jewish Gematria cipher, calling it the Agrippa key for English alphabet Gematria, sourced from the 3 books of occult philosophy, a book which you can find a PDF of online. That's what we're looking at here, esotericarchives.com. And, you know, not all Freemasons are in on the conspiracy and bad. Some of them are out trying to share genuine knowledge. You know, to me, blaming Freemasonry, you know, could be fair in some regard, but it's like blaming the Jews, right? I mean, some Freemasons might be in on something, same way some Jews are on something, are in on something. I think people of every race are on something, but humor aside, looking again at Mason Code, this explains the same cipher that I have on gematrinator.com. And here we're looking at Chapter 20 of Book 2 of Agrippa's 3 books of, what is it called? Agrippa's 3 books of occult philosophy from the 1500s, so way back in the 16th century. And here's the cipher explained. So this is based in Latin, and the first 23 letters of this cipher is essentially the Latin alphabet. And notice the letter J is missing. It skips J and goes directly to K. Then the letter W is missing. Now there's a couple of strange things here. You'll notice the letter I is actually twice. So here it sits at 9 and also 600. It's the first letter placed after the Latin alphabet ends. Well, in Latin, and I'm not an expert, there's probably people who can teach you more about this than me, but the J sound was also used with an I in the ancient Latin. So the J sound was added later. So although it says I here, this has it correctly listed as a J as we now know it today in the 600 position. The other strange thing is that you'll see another extra V. Now normally the U would be here, as it is on my website, U having the position of 200. Well, in ancient Latin, if you actually look at ancient texts, you'll notice that the letter V is used as a U. So Augustus Caesar, for instance, had several V's in his name. So what they did is they kept the sound at the 200 spot, but changed the letter to U, and then added the V over at 700, where, again, it sits here on my calculator. Now, one controversial thing, too, is that there's an ampersand at the 800 position. This is not consistent with what this uses, and really the ampersand is not something I ever discuss or talk about anyways. But essentially, this boils down to two ancient letters, Hiram and what looks like Wilhelm to me. And you'll notice the HU, or Wilhelm, is essentially the double V, or W. And then this Hiram is now an obsolete letter. It's basically not in existence anymore, not used. So that's why you have this kind of skip here at 800, and then the W, the Wilhelm, maybe, at the 900. So that's the root of this. And if you read this book on occult philosophy, this actually talks about how there's divinity behind this cipher, and you can figure out your birth star. You can figure out which spouse will die first with this gematria. And, you know, I'm not into that. That's they call it arithmancy, and maybe I'm doing that unknowingly to an extent, but, you know, there is something significant about this. And I always look back at my full name. And in Jewish gematria, my full name has this 1198. And I think back on when I first made the calculator, I kind of just threw reverse ordinal on that, not really knowing anything, or not knowing enough to know that it was a real cipher, but it just made sense to me. Like, if we can do the alphabet forwards, why wouldn't we do it backwards? And I started making observations that said, hey, there might be something to this. And then Zach eventually did some research into it and basically immediately agreed. Well, isn't it strange that reverse gematria equals 1198 as well? And a significant event happened when I was 11,980 days old. So this number, you know, is pretty interesting. And I think this is like a pi number too, because pi is 11 and then 3.14 is 98. Maybe I'm stretching it there, but so I urge everyone to pay special attention to that cipher because, you know, as I say, it's probably the most significant outside ordinal. Someone asked about a cipher that goes by nines. I'm going to decline adding that for now again because, you know, I have one cipher already where I'm multiplying the alphabetic order by a certain number, and to me that number makes a lot of sense because, you know, we obviously have the base 10 system numbering, but when we look at clocks, when we look at coordinates on the Earth, it boils down to minutes and seconds, which are used in 60. And, you know, obviously time is the other element of gematria. We combine gematria with dates on the calendar. And in a little bit, I'll get into the explanation of my decodes and my thought process that goes into this. And time is such a significant aspect to this because time is a little bit unique to our reality that we're experiencing here on Earth, which is why, you know, these people who are into the satanic government, they plan things for decades and centuries in advance maybe sometimes. And that's because there's greater forces at work, I believe, certainly. Well, anyway, you know, if we start, to me, multiplying the alphabetic order by 9, well, then you're always going to get a number that reduces to 9. And it's, you know, a lot of people say, well, then everything that's 74 sums to 666 in that cipher. And it's like, yes, but we already have a cipher that reveals the number of the beast, and that's Sumerian. And as you'll see, Sumerian is the cipher outside the base 6 that I share the most, or base 7. And before I touch on English Sumerian, I just want to look at English Extended, since this is the next most common one that I use. And to me, this is also very significant. Not as significant as Jewish gematria. There's just no way. The values in the Jewish cipher I find to be much more significant, much more consistently. And again, I've been doing this for years now, almost 4 years, paying attention to multi-layered calculators, trying to understand this. And English Extended is essentially the same as the Latin cipher, numbering it in 3 layers, 1 through 9, 10 through 90, and then 100 through 800. However, because Jewish has that 27th letter, it goes all the way up to 900, whereas English, only 26 letters. 2 plus 6 is 8, so we only go up to 800. And, I mean, this is perfectly logical, and this goes back to the basic Hebrew ciphers. This site explaining Hebrew standard. Again, this is the ancient Hebrew alphabet. You know, this says there's 22 ciphers of creation, just like there's 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. And 22 is a very significant number. It's a master number. See how master equals 22? And in Ordinal, master builder number equals 220. A big reason why I believe we're getting the coronavirus pandemic this year, a master builder number year, to change society by the numbers. Anyway, so Hebrew standard gematria goes up to 400 because there's only 22 letters. And then you have the ordinal cipher listed as the next significant. So, you know, whether ordinal is more significant than extended, I'm not sure. It just seems that because ordinal is smaller, again, there's a chance for more alignments. What is the significance of hex on number properties is a question I just got. So, let's bring up the number properties page and get into this quickly. So each number you bring up, or, you know, depending on how many digits or what the digits are, you know, you're going to see fewer if there's an 8 or 9 in here, but this will explain relations to other numbering systems. And the 3 main ones I use here are octal, duo, and hexadecimal. And this is not something I really decode of, so I don't want to spend too much time on this. I would urge everyone to do a little research and look this up. If you look up octal numbers in Wikipedia, what we find is that this presents a new way of numbering the numbers that we're familiar with, and it changes the base. So essentially, instead of base 10, this is base 8. So what that means is that the number 8 actually doesn't exist. So the way you would make this work is that it changes once it gets to 8. I appreciate a little more cooperation from my website today. Oh, jeez. All right, so let's look at 7. 7 is the same in all of these numbering systems, right? But as soon as we get to 8, notice how in octal this changes to 10 because the digits 8 and 9 do not exist. So essentially, 8 becomes 10, 16 becomes 20, 24 becomes 30, all the way up until 64 becomes 100. So I don't want to get too deep into that because this is, again, not something I share in my work. There's some significance to it, I'm sure, but not something to take too much time at. Do I think Tiger Woods will win the Masters again? No idea. I haven't looked into it. Just a reminder that I called pretty much exactly what would happen at the end of the Super Bowl. I said Patrick Mahomes would make a fourth quarter comeback, maybe 2 possessions to win the game, and of course that happened. You know, I'm only going to try and make a prediction if I think I know what's going to happen, and that's been my MO since I started, and I've never really been wrong. All right, so, you know, a couple comments about the less significant ciphers. You know, a lot of these ciphers, especially when we get into the big mathematical ones like squares, you know, you're going to get some pretty large numbers, so finding a match with something else is going to be pretty rare. But when you do, it feels very strong. And, you know, I think these ciphers are observed, they're significant, or they have significance, but is the mainstream media peppering us with square number riddles and riddles from reverse Francis Bacon? Probably not. I doubt it. And even if they are, I don't really see much point in finding them because you're not really going to convince anybody when you're doing so many different things to the alphabet, spinning it backwards, adding capital letters, integrating capital letters. You know, it might be significant, but you're not going to get a whole lot of new people on board that way, I guess is what I'm trying to get at. The masonry website that I was looking at was masoncode.com. Very simple. So they have a couple things about Gematria. They also mentioned the simple code of English Gematria, which is not a cipher I have on my site. And this essentially combines the I and the J. We talked about the reasoning for this in Latin. It also combines the U and the V. Now, I was kind of observing this cipher earlier today, and a couple things stand out like any cipher, but overall it doesn't seem like anything that I could find from today was coded in this cipher. But when you look at the alphabetic order, everything falls into place, like it always does, it seems. So, less and less over time have I become a proponent of using more ciphers, but that's not to say you shouldn't experiment and find things. That's why they're there, okay? Okay, so English Sumerian. This is the alphabetic order times 6. Again, 6 the number of time. And there's some kind of mystical story about the Sumerians being revealed time. Perhaps it was the Anunnaki. I don't know. But again, I like the number 6 because it has everything to do with time, and it's the cipher that's said to reveal the number of the beast, right? So New York has that 666. So does New Mexico. The coronavirus pandemic, heaviest in New York, and now. Remember, Bill Gates, who founded Microsoft in New Mexico, is the man who's promoting mandatory vaccinations, mandatory 666 vaccinations, or vaccination 666. So anything 111 in the Ordinal cipher is going to be 666 in Sumerian. And I do think Sumerian is significant even outside of the 666 riddles. For sure. Again, it's not something I try to bring too much attention to. But we're looking at 33 mentions of Sumerian in the past month on my blog. And again, a lot of that is for 666, but I do believe it's observed rather significantly. And a few months ago, I actually made a tier list, which I'm putting on the screen now. Try to make this a little bigger. And I mentioned, these ciphers listed in tiers, and if they're not on here, then I think they're, of some varying small significance. So English Ordinal, full reduction, Jewish Gematria. Those are the big three to me. The main 3 ciphers that are significant. And the stats, again, that supports it. 26.5% Ordinal, 18% reduction. And then a high, almost 13% Jewish, and that's with a large number cipher. So you're going to get less matches. The next most significant, basically, reverse Ordinal, reverse reduction, and English extended. English extended may be higher than this, but I don't want to put it above or alongside Jewish or Latin. And then Sumerian Gematria you'll find here in the 3rd tier. Now at the time, I put primes and trigonal here. I would actually change this now. I'm going to change this up. Put these down here and put Satanic Gematria alongside Sumerian. Also notice single reduction down here. I think I'm going to put that up to tier 3. So essentially we've gotten through the first 3 tiers, right? The ones that I find the most significant. And next we're going to look at Satanic. And this cipher, despite its creepy name, is actually really cool. That doesn't mean Satan's cool. To hell with Satan. Pun intended. This cipher blows my mind how it's put together. Now, the number 666 is related to the number 36, and that's for a couple of reasons. First of all, 666 is 3 6s, right? But more significantly is that if you add every single number, 1 through 36, you get a sum of 666. And of course, the Earth's axis on a 66.6 degree tilt to the plane of the sun. Notice how plane of the sun equals 156, just like 666, 156. In ordinal, of course, most significant. This Satanic Gematria cipher begins on the number 36. And then it simply adds 1 for every letter in the alphabet, maintaining the alphabetic order all the way through Z. So that means Z ends up with a value of 61. And this number ties into the riddle as well. 61 is the 18th prime number. 18 is 6 plus 6 plus 6. And in Satanic Gematria, when you write out Satanic Gematria, it sums to 666. And there's certainly significance to this cipher too. I call attention to the Wikipedia page for Elizabeth Christ Trump. Notice how Elizabeth Trump equals 666 in this cipher. And look at the date she died. 6666. So, this is one of the best examples I can find, or that stays in my head as far as whether or not Satanic Gematria is significant. There's absolutely something to this, and I don't talk about it very often. Again, it's a large number cipher, but it certainly has significance. I know Dan Barrett really likes this cipher. Zach mentions it quite often as well. I see Zenith of the Alphas in the chat. He's got mod powers because his work is amazing. I've seen the channel Decode Your Reality. Someone mentioned that channel, Decode Your Reality on YouTube, bringing alchemy and tarot cards and stuff in that, or stuff like that. I've seen a couple of his videos. I'm on board with what he's doing. I think it's pretty cool. I've seen a lot of people focus on the Chaldean cipher, which I'll get into in a little bit. I think there's significance to it, but I struggle to relate with it, again, because it's such a small number cipher that, with everything that we've discovered in the alphabetic order, that makes more sense to me. It's tough to get on board with all of it, but again, everyone has their own perspective on this. We're all learning together. I don't mean to knock anybody down a notch. I think, anybody who's really looking and sharing their finds is doing good work. Or at least doing some work. A lot of people are doing no work, just sitting at home right now. Okay, so jumping down the tier list, I want to look next at the prime, trigonal, and square ciphers. These are what I call mathematical ciphers. And these ciphers use the standard alphabetic order. However, it uses associated prime numbers. And obviously on my blog, I talk about prime numbers all the time. I think every single video is talking about prime number connections. So this cipher to me is very logical. If you even look at the 22 ciphers of creation, it talks about prime numbers, known as the numeric building blocks in mathematics. So this is very significant. The cipher itself, I find more significance in it when you get a prime number in this cipher, right? So let's say, here we get a prime number in the prime number cipher. So perhaps there's weight to the number 106 here, or 16. Trigonal gematria we just talked about a little bit. We talked about triangular numbers, adding every number 1 through 36. Well, if you add every number 1 through 26, you get 351. That's why Z, the 26th letter, gets 351. So you get 1 plus 2 is 3, plus 3 is 6, plus 4 is 10, plus 5 is 15. Again, the standard alphabetic order. Square numbers, which is the largest mathematical cipher, still uses the 26-letter alphabet, but multiplies each number by itself prior to adding it to the equation. So here we see E, the 5th letter, 5 times 5 is 25. P, the 16th letter, 16 squared is 256. So this is a very basic cipher as well. And again, you're not doing much to the alphabetic order. You're just applying simple mathematical principles. These ciphers are also available on my website in reverse. They're probably observed. It's not something I share in my work because, I'm already muddying up the waters a lot with, 6 or 7 ciphers. So I'm trying to pull people into this understanding that we've come to. I agree with the chat. Bill Gates is a virus. Bill Gates' virus is wait. Well, look at that. That's funny. Remember, guys, Bill Gates equals 87 and 156. 666. 87, 156, right? Bill Gates 57, like 666. 57. As far as the 201, his full name, William Henry Gates, equals 201. Event 201, the global pandemic exercise held right before the real one went live. And then his full name equals 228. And the 228th verse of Revelation states that no man will be able to buy or sell without the mark of the beast, and that's why he's aligned with the 666 agenda. Notice how his name also equals 111. He's also got an III in his name. Remember, anything that sums to 111 in the alphabetic order also sums to 666 in Sumerian. So Bill Gates could not be more coded with the number of the beast. What I even missed is that William Henry Gates equals 258. Number of the beast, 258. So, thanks for that find, Zenith. That was cool. All right. Then we have the capital letter ciphers, and these also are available forwards and reverse. And these ciphers, again, still the alphabetic order. Here in Francis Bacon, we add 26 for each capital letter. So the alphabet numbered small, then large. Maybe there's a cipher where we use large letters first, or capitals, and then small letters second. Never really tried it, never looked at it. To me, we're doing enough things with the alphabet, but just food for thought. It's not as logical to me, though, too, because this is more of an extension of Ordinal. The other cipher, and again, another shout-out to Zenith, who was the one who really began looking deep into this first and was able to convince me over a short enough time that there's another capital letter cipher where capital letters are interchanged with small letters. We call this the classroom cipher also. And as you'll see here, capital A, capital B, small b. So essentially, we're multiplying the alphabetic order by 2 and subtracting 1 for every capital letter. Whereas with Francis Bacon, everything still is ordinal. See how it matches? Unless we add a capital letter. And then we add 26. So there's formulas for these as well. Very basic stuff. I list them in tier 4. Let's see what the statistics say. Less than 1% for each. And really, these are limited ciphers because you can't use them with standard words, really. You'll only ever see me use these with names or maybe city-state names. I think when the state is abbreviated, like Washington being WA, capitalizing those and then looking at these ciphers, I think there's significance to that, but pretty limited. And I would actually say Frank Baconus might be the more significant cipher. I think it's more frequently used, personally. Then we'll look at the Kabala ciphers. These all attributed to Aleister Crowley. They can be found in his works from the early 1900s. And these ciphers are actually kind of cool, at least ALW and KFW are, because I can understand how they're built. So ALW uses every 11th letter. It goes by the first master number. So think about this. A is assigned 1, right? Now, if you were to add 11 to 1, you would get 12. And L is the 12th letter, so that's why L receives 2 in Kabala. If we add 11 to 12, we get 23. That would be W. W gets 3. Then when we get to the end of the alphabet, all we do is start from the beginning again. So if we go 11 letters forward from W, think X, Y, Z gives us 3. And then we have 8 more to travel. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. And then you move 11 more up to S, the 19th. You reset the alphabet, then D. So sometimes you have 2 alphabet letters in a row alphabetically. Sometimes you have 3. Now, I used to have a really crafty Excel file to explain how this cipher is built also. Essentially, you're rearranging the alphabet by the ALW cipher and then using rules. So you're essentially using the same rules as ALW, except when you reset the alphabet, you only go forward, I think, 3 letters. I would have to put it back together to really fully understand this or explain it, but understand that these 2 ciphers are connected. And what you'll notice is that the ALW and KFW ciphers are always off by a multiple of 8. So let's type in calculator. Now, if you take 132 subtract 92, you get 40, which is 8 times 5, because these letters are always 8 off of one another. Gematria. 118 minus 94, that's 24, which is 8 times 3. So they're always going to be 8 apart. So it's not that significant when they match, but there might be some more weight to that number, right? Now, what really perplexes me, love that word, is this LCH cipher. I was never able to fully understand how this cipher is constructed. In fact, it's very bizarre. Instead of going 1 through 26, it goes 0 through 25. And the I, or representing the ego, gets a 0. You know, this is like the fool almost. It's a pretty interesting cipher, but I was not able to figure out a numeric structure that explained how it was built. It seems to be random. I tried for like a day. I couldn't figure it out. So there's something occultic or mystical about these letters maybe in this order. One of my favorites, though, is that, you know, the word riddle has triple gematria of 74. And we explained how riddles are coded into simple English gematria. Which is, again, a Jewish practice or an occult practice, also a Masonic practice. So that's pretty much all the ciphers on here. The other one is Chaldean. I'm not going to get too deep into this, but there's something to it. There's plenty of knowledge available on the Chaldean cipher on the internet that could do a better job of explaining it than I could. Then you'll see Septenary. This is the one from the Marty Leeds channel. Really, I don't actually ever use this cipher. In fact, I put Septenary in the bottom 7th tier. And notice how there's no tier 6. Well, that's because Septenary is built around 7. That's right, I can make funnies too. So Septenary, might there be some significance in it? Perhaps, but I see this as similar to ALW. What I notice is that there might be more significance to it when it lines up with Septenary or Chaldean, when there's a match, right? So we know Washington, D.C., a significant name of a city, the capital of the country, the land of the 47, Septenary and Chaldean both with 47. So to me, that's similar to Kabala, and I don't really share these. And then finally, Zenith of the Alpha also did some great research into the keypad cipher, which essentially looks at your telephone and numbers the alphabet accordingly. Wow, I totally forgot about the chat for a while there, guys, so I'm going to try and scroll up and take a second to glance at it. Oh, yeah, Bill Gates, IBM 666, interesting. Of course, it would be more interesting if Bill Gates' Microsoft summed it to 666. You know, Microsoft is the name of a business, so we can use capital letters here. Notice how Microsoft equals 144. It could be Microsoft. This would make sense, but it makes more sense to have the 144. That's the gematria of corporation. Mark of the beast is 144, and the first 144 digits after the decimal in pi sum to 666. A couple comments about the virus that's going around. You know, Good Maki, I kind of agree with you at this point, and I don't like to talk about the science behind the virus too much because I'm not really authorized to. I don't know that much about it, but I've been really trying to understand and learn as much as I can, and to the best of my understanding, there is no viral contagion out there that's killing anybody right now. I think what we're seeing is a response to environmental toxins. The test for this virus is not what we are really looking for as far as proof. All we're seeing is exosomes on cells. And, you know, the germ theory of disease appears to be never proven. In German courts, I learned that it was declared that measles was not a virus. And you would think the Germans, you know, they take science and engineering quite literally. You wouldn't think that would be a place that would just make that judgment incorrectly. So I think it's fair to assume, and this is something, you know, most of us in the truth community didn't even realize, is how much we've been lied to about medicine and our bodies over time. If you study microbiology, you learn about viruses, but you don't really learn much about where they come from or how they're distributed. And I'm quite worried that there's a pretty large misunderstanding about that. And, you know, I do have a grave concern that generation number 5 of wireless technology is involved in this. You know, it's definitely changing the environment, changing the EMF waves in the air, and this is something humans are sensitive to. And I've been talking to everybody I know about it, and of course people think I'm crazy, but it's going to be the crazy people that turn out to be right in the end times, and no doubt COVID-19 is a massive revelation riddle. And yeah, it does seem that germ theory is unproven. And it's interesting, you know, this whole idea of the mark of the beast. Is there a bigger test in faith, guys, to the idea that one day, and of course vaccinations don't really make sense in the first place since there's going to be a new strain of something every year. So what is a vaccination going to do against anything if it's just going to mutate? You know, it takes them 2 years to figure one out. And then, yeah, whatever. You guys know, but I mean, is there a larger test of faith, right? You have the Bible that tells you what's going to happen. You have people like myself and others decoding this 666 riddle for you to explain to you what's happening. With all that knowledge, could you still possibly get the get the mark of the beast, get vaccinated, get chipped? I think most of us here know better than that. And to me, it's a test of faith. Like, maybe this is God testing us to the max, you know, seeing who will reject that mark. Because I know I'm ready to. And remember, they can't force anything on you. That's not how it works in this realm. That's not what I believe. But it's very important to stay informed on what's really happening. And I do think, honestly, in my heart, that this technology that they're employing all over the world, especially right now, does have something to do with it. And I think back to when I used to get sick, and, you know, I don't remember getting the flu from anybody in particular. I remember being pretty sick with it one year, especially 2007. But every time I've been sick since then, it's been bacterial. You know, like I was at a festival and I was breathing in a cloud of dirt and I got sick. And of course, my immune system was lower there to begin with. I had strep throat once, but, you know, strep is pretty common. But as, you know, ever since I've been more conscious about what I've been eating over the past 5 or 6 years, I mean, I haven't gotten sick at all, very badly, aside from those bacterial infections. So, Yeah, try and educate yourself as much as you can with germ theory, because right now it still seems ridiculous to me to go up to the idea to go up to somebody and say germs don't even cause disease, viruses are not contagious, but I think that might actually be true based on what I'm seeing around me. And this coronavirus, why is it still spreading so much with all these social distancing measures in place? We can go to the frickin' store, but we can't go to the park where people genuinely stay further away from each other anyway. It's obvious something's wrong here, and those who are unwilling to admit it are lost souls at this point, I'm sorry to say. And unfortunately, we can't ride with all the lost souls, It's going to be tough. Like, this is hard. Again, this is a big test. And some of these people, they're not going to respond like we hope they will. And I'm seeing that in my own family. It's been very difficult. I lost enough friends when I first found numerology, and now that something happened, especially when I predicted the year, I predicted the city it would begin in, so I have every reason to know what's really happening, and for people to still turn a blind eye to it, they're lost as far as I'm concerned. And it's too bad, but I pray for them, but I can't let it affect me more than it does. All right, guys, so we're almost an hour in, and I'm finally ready to start looking at these news stories. I want to explain how I go into these things when decoding. So we're going to start with a very basic news story first, and then we're going to get into a couple more complicated riddles as we go. So let's expect this to run maybe another 30 or 40 minutes, I guess. And again, sorry for not keeping up with all the chat, but kind of running behind here. So again, all these stories we'll look at are about COVID-19. They're all from the past 24 hours. This one really stuck out to me. And I don't decode all the big news stories on my blog. I don't like looking at the same people over and over. I like to see what else is going on. And, props again to someone like Zach, who does all the big stories and, has an output greater than all of us combined almost. Anyway, so here we have a story about the Florida Grim Reaper. And this is a very bizarre story. So the beaches are reopening this week in Florida, and people, of course, are going to be going out because it's sunny and nice and beautiful, and it's the beach. And people want to look at girls. They haven't seen girls for months, and vice versa. So people are going to go out. Now, this asshole is going to stand out there in a Grim Reaper costume. And who is this asshole? Let's take a look at him. Daniel Uhlfelder. I don't need to meet this guy to know he's an asshole. Just look at his smug grin for starters. Look at the fact that he's a lawyer. And look at the fact that he runs a political action committee. This whole stunt is to build funds for the Democrats. So, an asshole in every sense of the word. And you know what I hope happens? I hope he goes out into the 100-degree weather in Florida in this black Grim Reaper costume. And I hope he has heat exhaustion, because that would be absolutely hilarious. Absolutely hilarious. Wouldn't that be? If he starts sweating into his eyes, he can't see. So funny. So let's talk about why this guy was chosen. He didn't do this randomly. This guy is certainly part of a larger secret society. He runs a political action committee. He's involved in politics, and he's a frickin' lawyer. Of course, there's a big budget behind this. He was doing it as a fundraiser. Well, here's the first thing I noticed. Florida Grim Reaper equals 103 in reduction. Of course, this represents the number 13 in numerology. And when we talk about 13 in relation to the tarot, this is the death card. And of course, the death card has kind of the Grim Reaper on it, right? You see the skeleton in the night outfit about to kill the king, stepping on dead bodies. This is a very dark card, and it's the 13th in the tarot. Remember, Gematria 74. Tarot 74. This man is named Lawyer Daniel Uhlfelder. Now, his regular name is significant, and we will look at this in a little bit, but a lot of the times all you got to do is put their job in front, and you get basic matches in these ordinal ciphers. And I'm at the point in decoding where I would rather enter their job than take their name and put it in another cipher that doesn't make as much sense. To me, this is much more akin, but there's actually more here that you can unlock. Not only does this equal 103, like the Grim Reaper, like the Death card, But it's also 113, so we get two 13s. Notice the reverse value of 347. When we write out 13, look at that. It sums to 347. Again, the connection between Latin Gematria and English cannot be overstated. What I also noticed is that in Frank Baconus, Florida Grim Reaper equals 347, just like lawyer Daniel Ulfelder. Now, on this Mason Code website, there's also something called the Rule of Colel, which believes that you can add or subtract 1 to any Gematria value and still get a match. Now, I don't try to use this because talk about playing with numbers, right? We're just adding or subtracting 1 at will. But how interesting is it that we talked about this 347, Florida Grim Reaper, just like 347? Well, how about the fact that the name Ulfelder equals 348? Now, this guy made national news yesterday, May 1st, and May 1st was the anniversary of the Bavarian Illuminati. In fact, it was a very significant anniversary. It would be the 244th anniversary, and notice how May 1st is the date leaving 244 days in the year. The word Satanic sums to 244. In Hebrew, the word for kill equals 244. The number 19, 244. Kill equals 19 and 244 in Hebrew. So the Bavarian Illuminati was founded with 13 families, and 13 is the only number to sum to 99 in Ordinal. Notice how Daniel equals 99 in English Extended. It also sums to 45, which is 13 in reduction. Reaper sums to 36, like Daniel. Notice how Daniel also equals 117. The name Ulfelder also 117. Well, 13 equals 117 in reverse. This guy could not be more coded with 13, and that's not even it. Notice how the name Ulfelder sums to 91 in the alphabetic order. 91 is the 13th triangular number. And then to top it off, lawyer Daniel Ulfelder also equals coronavirus pandemic. Remember, coronavirus declared a pandemic on the 11th of March, 11/3 in 2020. As far as the Rule of Colel, just something I want to point out is that my basic name sums to 142. I actually have a really interesting alignment there. Notice how in non-leap years, May 22nd is the 142nd day of the year. The date 522, the 142nd day. My name equals 142 and 522. So I always thought that was interesting. But notice how Gematria equals 142. And this even goes further. My name, my first name equals numbers, my last name equals letters. It's something I've shared on occasion on this channel. But look at Gematrinator. Notice how Gematrinator equals 141 and 183. Very similar to my name, 142 and 182. You know, it's just one off. One off in reduction also. So maybe there's something to it, mystically, you know? I can't say for sure, but that is interesting to me. And again, I just used that name because I thought it was cool. All right, so the next story we're going to look at comes out of New Mexico. And what we're seeing here now is a drill gone live. Think back to 2015 when they were doing those Jade Helm exercises. I believe that those were in preparation for things like this. So not only are states being closed and people told they're not essential, they can't go to work, but this city in New Mexico, Gallup, New Mexico, you can't even get in. The roads are closed because the coronavirus spread is so bad. So now they're installing new curfews. Businesses can only be open at certain times. This is complete tyranny to the max. I mean, it can't get much further than this, but they're going to try. So in order to allow this to happen, the governor invoked the Riot Control Act. The Riot Control Act to beat a virus. What's going on in this world, right? So what we're going to do is understand how to decode this story. Now, there's so many things you could look at, right? You could look at the headline. You could look at the name of the city. You could type in coronavirus. We're going to do most of that, but I want to talk to you about my thought process. And the first thing I thought was that this is directly related to the governor of the state. And this goes for most false flags, especially when the governor is in the media talking. So always look at the numerology of the governor. And here we have Michelle Lujan Grisham. And the first thing I did, like I always do, is see how long they've been in office. And this story comes from yesterday, which is May 1st. So exactly 16 months in office. There's several numbers to look at, right? 1121, that's usually a big one to look at. The number of months might be significant because it's exact. Well, we also have 69 weeks. And now for me, I guess one improvement I will look to make to the website in the future is pointing out prime numbers, because when I see the number 486, and this is the kind of thing I talk about when I say you have to practice numerology, you have to really observe and pay attention, and it's going to take time. Now, when I see 486, I also see a span of 487, and I know 487 is a prime number. It's the 93rd prime number. Think about how Saturn equals 93. The 93rd prime number is 487. They like to use this number in the news because propaganda equals 93. So that, to me, comes from a knowledge base. Like, a lot of people ask, can you teach me to decode? I don't know how to teach you to memorize prime numbers, okay? And I don't mean to be a jerk, but that's how my mind works. Just a flashback, and I don't want to seem conceited, but I truly think that I was born to do this to some extent, right? And to me, one of the best evidences of this is that I was always a natural great speller. I have several trophies. I have a bunch of ribbons. And I know I had a post on the spelling bee. Oh, yeah, here it is. Because my mom framed this for me. So I used to win all the spelling bees, right? And I never studied for them. I just had a photographic memory. I saw a word. I knew how to spell it immediately. And that just kind of stuck with me. So I went to state for spelling bee. Of course, like I said, I didn't study. So I didn't get very far in that spelling bee. But I was always winning the school spelling bees for the most part. Same with geography bees, too. Or at least I did well in them. So, I don't know. I can't relate to everybody in that regard. To me, it's just I know 487 is a prime. It's 93, right? So the first thing I did is look at the dates, and I just take these numbers into account. We got a 69 or a 694, a 487, which relates to 93. Now, I didn't type her name out because I don't think the gematria of the governor is necessarily going to be very significant at this point. I want to find the beef of the riddle. And the beef of the riddle is going to lie in the city where this occurred. So you better believe the gematria of Gallup, New Mexico is going to stand out. So we start with just the city of Gallup. And this is the kind of thing that should show you that gematria is legit. There's nothing ridiculous about this. This is the code. Because the first thing I saw when I typed in Gallup is 69, like how she's been in office for 69 weeks. And in reverse, Gallup is 93. just like how she's been in office for the 93rd prime number of days. So when I see this, I almost get angry because I know that 90% of the people out there think I'm crazy or whatever, and maybe less so now. But all I have to do is do this, and it immediately lines up. I never have to play with numbers. Notice how Gallup also has overlap with Corona, like 30 and 69. Corona, 30 and 96. Furthermore, Gallup, New Mexico, which you should always check as well, the city with the abbreviated state, you also get 96 and 33, like Corona. So a criticism would be, well, there's several ways you could type out the city, so you're just picking one and finding alignments. No, I'm looking at every possible way, the city with the state abbreviated, and the full city state, and you will always find matches. So Gallup and Gallup, New Mexico, already with alignments. Now, what about the fact that Gallup is situated on Route 66? They point that out in this article as well. And it's interesting that Route 66 equals 66. This is another number of Corona. It's the only number I blanked out in this chart here. So here we have a city on Route 66, like Corona, that has matching gematria with Corona. And again, what's the big law that they've invoked? The Riot Control Act, which also sums to 66. A nice 686. So for me, I'm familiar with the numbers of Corona because I've been typing it out almost every day and explaining in all my blog posts how this number is coded everywhere. And when you have a basic understanding of what you're looking at, it becomes much more apparent. And finally, this is all about the 666 code, the number 66, Revelation, the 66th book of the Bible. The word Corona is 6 letters and sums to 66. Well, Gallup, New Mexico equals 180. Remember, this is 6 plus 6 plus 6 is 18, right? Next, let's look a little deeper at the governor, because the first riddle popped out immediately, the 69, the 93. There's going to be a little bit more to this. Now, first of all, I just typed in her name, and I wanted to peek around, so let me walk you through my process. First, I looked at her full name, and there's interesting numbers here, 115 and 34. Masonic, 115 and 43. The 200, I explained this in a video recently. Remember Satanic Gematria, 600, 6, the number of the beast? Here we get the 200th prime number. So this is connected to the 666 code. So right away when I see a 200 in Ordinal, remember this is the Gematria of Bill Gates and Paul Allen, the founders of Microsoft, 200 and 666. And then I'm like, well, you know, she's got two names. I guess one is her birth name, or maybe they're using Latin or Spanish naming customs. So maybe Michelle Grisham has significance, but less likely so. There's a couple things here. That this is the 56th prime number. And her name equals 142. So in her gematria, you get 56 and 142. And remember, coronavirus, 56 and 142. So I didn't even put that in my blog post, but there's another alignment that she's doing a big thing here by using this law for a virus that we can't even prove exists. And just if we look at the name Grisham, we find governor numbers, 39 and 114. Governor, 39 and 114. Notice how she also has a longer name. I guess there might be something here as well. And I did point out, yep, look at this. Her full name is the 32nd prime number, 131, and she's the 32nd governor. So they're going to be coded with multiple numbers. Again, you can do anything with numbers, but it's always this easy. you know. Now, here's another thing I noticed when I typed in Grisham. I also noticed that it sums to 225. Well, if you were paying attention to the reverse alphabetic order, you may have noticed that Gallup, New Mexico equals 225. So Governor Grisham moving in on the citizens of Gallup, New Mexico by the numbers, 225. This city even says the roads are closed. Notice how roads, also 225, maybe just a pure coincidence, but pretty interesting. Now, what if I told you this 225 pointed us to a much deeper part of the riddle? And again, this is the kind of thing that I don't know how to teach because, you know, this is why I make these videos and share this information, is so that I hope it hooks into people and that they can take this knowledge that I'm paying attention to, sharing and, you know, memorizing it to an extent. Because if you can't, then it's going to be a lot harder. Now, if you're familiar with my work, you know I talk a lot about the Metonic cycle. And my first clue that the Metonic cycle was significant was this number down here. Well, they must have changed this recently. Anyway, notice how the number 254 appears in this cycle. So in the Metonic cycle, it's a period of almost exactly 19 years that lines up almost perfectly with 235 lunar phases. And think about how significant the moon is. You know, the Hebrew calendar uses the moon. The Islamic calendar uses the moon. These calendars are lunisolar, I think, or Jewish is. The Hebrew calendar is lunisolar. The Islamic calendar, I believe, is completely lunar. Don't quote me on that, please. But and the reason I thought this is significant is by adding these 19 years and 235 synodic months, we learned that this is 254 sidereal months, which is the moon's orbit in relation to the stars, not the sun. And I recognize this number because it was significant to the 9/11 ritual. September 11th is the 254th day of the year. Notice how time equals 254, and time is relative to the speed of light, 254. So I saw this number in the Metonic cycle and thought, dang, that's interesting. You know, the sun, by the way, is the 19th card on the tarot, and we're talking about 19 solar year cycle. The word sun begins with the 19th letter. So I was like, there must be something more to this, right? And absolutely, this is a huge, huge thing. And I often talk about how the Metonic cycle is most significant in stories about women. And of course, here we have Michelle Grisham, a female politician, the first Latina governor in the United States history. So the number 225, why is this significant? Well, Meton equals 225. Meton is the astronomer credited with explaining and discovering the Metonic cycle. Notice how Meton in Ordinal sums to 67, the 19th prime. His cycle is 19 years long. Do you believe this guy really existed even, or is he just a coded character of history? I suppose that's up to you. But once again, it's always coded in English and Latin. So what about Metonic cycle? Notice how this sums to 668. We already see the 225 alignments with Grisham, Gallup, New Mexico. But what if we look at her birthday, which is the next thing I would look at? October 24th of 1959, measuring to the date of this news story, is exactly a span of 60 years, 6 months, 8 days. Just like Metonic cycle 668. Even her full name sums to 686 in Jewish, right? So a rearranging of those numbers. So there's multiple layers. We're not just looking at one thing. We're looking at multiple things, and we're looking at the same things we decode every single time. Again, these are the most significant ciphers on my website, and I will continue to use them to decode. Next, there's another part of this riddle. Remember, the Metonic cycle is 19 years in length. Notice how this woman was also 190 days after her birthday, which took place in the year 2019. What's this disease called? COVID-19. Remember, 19 equaling 244, and this news story was the date that leaves 244 days in the year. So, another heavily coded article, and to me, the average decoder, the relative newbie, could probably get to this part of the riddle, the 33, the 66. Remember, 33 equals 66, and 66 is 33 times 2. We have a city on Route 66. But always, especially when the governor's taking action like this, there's always going to be significant numerology. So look at the date that they took office and look at their birthday. And the date they took office is probably going to be even more significant. As far as how you would get to the Metonic cycle riddle, again, watch, learn, pay attention, do your own research. Bring new things to my attention. Again, someone brought the Metonic cycle to my attention. I didn't discover this and then start sharing this. Someone just pointed it out, and I was like, oh, I started looking at it, and, it all started making sense after that. So, that to me is pretty clear. Maybe they could have figured out the 190 thing, too, with the COVID-19, 190 days after her birthday. All right, and the final story we'll look at, running near an hour and a half here, so we'll wrap this up soon. But we got this really interesting story, and I don't want to say funny just in case it's real, but pretty sure it's not. And remember, the media is engaged in the most massive mind control operation of all time, right? We know that MK Ultra is responsible for what we now know as our mainstream media. And they're in full force during this pandemic, trying to keep people scared. And Fox News is playing a very interesting role. Trying to rally in the conspiracy theorists. The people like us who know what's going on and try to turn them on their side, but it's all very suspicious. Anyway, I want to take what we learned about decoding a governor and apply it to a president. So here we have a story from the country of Turkey. Okay? You'll see here, coming out of Turkey. And of course, this means it's going to be related to the president of Turkey, without a doubt. There's no question in my mind. That's just how this code works. We also learned that this woman is from Kazakhstan, so there's probably something there too. And once you start talking about multiple countries, multiple politicians, it might get a little murky. But I'm going to walk you through my decode, and then my discovery of a second news story that linked it together made sense of it all. So the very first thing I did is type in the name of the victim. And just so you guys know, I'm actually going to use this calculator. This is the table that I use when I decode and make blog posts and videos. I don't pay any attention to anything outside of these ciphers anymore. The only exception would be occasionally I know some things in Jewish ordinal or reduction that might be significant. I'll also use like a K exception once in a great while. But for the most part, this is the table I'm using. I'm looking at these ciphers, these 4, and then these 3. And these are the most significant 7. I have no doubt. And then you have the next tier, Satanic, Sumerian down here, Frank Bacona's Francis Bacon, and finally, the mathematical ciphers in the lower right. So when I'm decoding, I'm looking at this, and I don't really take note of all of these numbers. What I do is I take note of what's here, and then maybe later I'll find matches in there, but I'm not looking for that. So what I want to point out here is Olicia Suspicina, right? Her name as it's spelled. I noticed it's summed to 224. And this is a number that's been huge with coronavirus. Think about how corona equals 224. It originated in Hubei, 224. And in the year 2024, we get to see the corona again during the Greater American Total Solar Eclipse. And we had the coach of the New Orleans Saints get coronavirus, his name 224. And then there was a kicker from the Saints who died of coronavirus a few weeks later. The singer of Fountains of Wayne died of coronavirus. All of these, 208, 224. This number's been stamped everywhere. Boris Johnson diagnosed 2 months, 24 days after his birthday, or 224 days before it. I can't remember the riddle, but it's been everywhere. So immediately, that's the number that stuck out to me. Now, what I also noticed is that they changed the spelling of her name later on in the same article. Notice they start using a Y. Isn't that interesting? They changed it from IA to YA. Well, notice how YA also equals 224. So they stamped this number on her twice immediately. And this is a story about a hiker falling after celebrating the lockdown of coronavirus. And remember, this is all media mind control, trying to put humor into the idea that people are exercising their freedom and leaving their houses. Sounds ridiculous, but that's really how evil this entire pandemic is. Remember, guys, the word pandemic etymologically has nothing to do with illness or disease or death. All it means is that everyone is infected with demons. This is literally an attempt of a demonic takeover of the population, and it must be thwarted with knowledge, with spirituality, hopefully not with force, but we might get to that point. What's also interesting about this name is that it sums to 162. With the S exception, the other spelling, also 100. These are numbers of Turkey. Turkey sums to 62 and 100. Notice how Turkey also equals 208. Olesia Suspicina equals 208. So a story from Turkey, all you have to do is type in Turkey and then the woman's name, and you already get matches all over the place. And then the cipher it doesn't match in matches Corona. So what I did is I looked up the president of Turkey. President of Turkey. Wiki. How easy is this? Look, guys, I'm a professional decoder. So we find it's Recep Tayyip Erdogan, or Erdogan as some people call him, right? So all I did was take his full name, and remember, I always omit the... We'll actually talk about this. I usually omit the foreign characters, but check this out. With the foreign character omitted, you get 1303. That's the gematria of coronavirus, 1303. Story about coronavirus from Turkey. Awesome. Also notice how his name has that 292. Remember the same day? Michelle Lujan Grisham, 292. Pretty wild, right? All these stories are connected. This is how the news works. So I said, all right, how long has this guy been in office? August 28th, 2014. To the date of the news story. All right, well, nothing stands out immediately to me. But I will explain what ultimately this has to do with. So instead of, okay, we can't find anything right away with the date he took office. We're going to note these numbers mentally or jot them down for yourself, whatever you want to do. We'll come back to this. The next thing we're going to do is look at his age. And all I'm doing is walking you through my thought process. Oh, what's this? Wow, very interesting. So right away, and I always start this way, right? This is the default of the calculator, years and then days. The next most significant would be years, months, and days. Of course, months, weeks also significant, especially when it's exact. But years and days is most significant to me. And right off the bat, we find that the president of Turkey is 66 years and 66 days old. Remember, we talked about 66 at length in the story about the governor from New Mexico. Remember, Corona 66. The date May 1st in Sumerian Gematria equals 666, the anniversary of the Illuminati. Now, this is debatable, but what I also did is used his name, but I took out the foreign character and put in the English character, right? And look at this, we get 66 in reduction. So maybe there is significance with English characters as well. He's 66 years, 66 days old, his name is 66, and 666, just like May 1st. The name of the woman who died, with the S exception, I said I was going to use my table. Notice how her last name equals 66 as well. Suspicina. You got to look at their last name in addition to their full name. Maybe their first name too, but I doubt it. Nothing stands out in either first. The first name isn't going to be as important. It's a filler. Now, what's interesting is that they said this woman was from Kazakhstan, right? So I went and found the president of Kazakhstan. And would you believe his name also equals 66 in the same cipher? And he is also 66 years old. So you get a story about a woman in Turkey from Kazakhstan. Her last name is 66. Her name equals coronavirus in Turkey. And both presidents have names that sum to 66 and are 66 years old. Wow. Notice how Corona equals 33, Erdogan with the foreign letter 33. And this story is about a hiker. So, of course, we want to, drop that in at some point. Hiker equals 33. Oh, boy. Hiker, 33. And then hike also equals 33. Hike is one of those few words that has a larger value in English than Jewish. This is only possible when the letter K is used, and then only letters before I. Anyway. And of course, if you measure to the date that the Kazakhstan president took office, it was 137 days after the Independence Day. No, that's right. This is a whole other part of the riddle. So this is where I can see people getting a little, restless with the numbers of things I'm decoding, but I assure you they use the independence days of these nations as well. So Turkey has something called Republic Day. Kazakhstan has its own Independence Day. The date of this story was aligned to both. And if you think about it, Republic Day equals 181. This woman died 181 days after Republic Day, and the story was published 181 days before the next Republic Day. Turkey equals 62. It was 6 months, 2 days after Republic Day. So this one, it could be a little bit of a stretch, but this is what I found. There's always alignments. So I'm going to skip that, though, and go to the next part of this story, because this is what really confirmed everything I know about the news already. So I was scrolling the news later in the day, and I came across this news story. Michael Jordan was offered $100 million to appear at an event, and he said no? Does that sound believable to you? $100 million? I would do everything but basically sell my soul or something like that for $100 million, right? No rituals or anything. But holy crap, $100 million? He turned it down? So right off the bat, I'm already suspicious because I know that Jordan has the same gematria as Turkey. Last week I did a video, or 2 weeks ago I did a video on Michael Jordan and his documentary. And I remember that Jordan equals 62 and 100 just like Turkey. 62 and 100. $100 million? How often do you see a round number like this in the media? It's usually some precise number like 93 or 47. So I'm like, okay, there's a numeric riddle here, right? Jordan equals Turkey, 100, Turkey. There must be a relation here. So what I thought is we already have the nations of Turkey and Kazakhstan from the last story. But what about the nation of Jordan? Is there a riddle here as well? And what I found is Jordan's Independence Day, which is celebrated on May 25th, celebrating its independence from the United Kingdom. And what I found is that it was a span. Or wait, it was 525. That's right. Okay, this makes more sense. So notice how Jordan was 27,005 days old. Now, if you saw my video on the global vaccination agenda, you'll notice that 666 sums to 275. Notice how it also sums to 95. Well, look at the date that Jordan declared its independence, 95. So you have a 666 riddle right there. Remember, this is all coming together on May 1st. But what really brings this together is the prime minister. So you have a monarch, and there's certainly something to this guy too. I mean, look, he became king in 1999, which is an upside-down 66, or 666. He got the coronation on June 9th, or 6-9, which is a 6 upside down. So already you see it in this guy. But what about the prime minister? It's always going to be more aligned with the government, I think, than the king. And I was like, dude, there's no way this is a coincidence. Prime Minister Omar Razaz. Look at this gematria. 313 and 133. 600, 3 score and 6. 313 and 133. And notice how Prime Minister Omar Razaz equals 2290. Well, the 229th verse of Revelation reveals the number of the beast to be 600, 3 score and 6. So he's coded with 666. June 14th, 2018, he took office. Oh, wow. Yep. Okay. I'll explain this in a second. Let's go at his birthday first. 1161. He's got numbers of Revelation, 59 and 121. 121 and 59, the gematria of Revelation. Very easy to build these riddles, once again. But here's, I think, why this Jordan thing is so significant. Look how long it's been since he took office. 98 weeks in 1 day. Now, I want you to remember this number. In Jewish gematria, beast equals 198. And this was a very significant number to the story about Turkey. Now, Erdogan might be most famous around the world for the 2016 coup d'etat attempt. And this was either an attempted overthrow of his government or a way for Erdogan to strengthen his grip on the government, depending on who you ask. Now, I want you to notice something, and I guess this is far beyond the instructional point of this video. I don't know how I expect you to know this when you're decoding, but it takes time, it takes familiarity with world events, and everything comes into picture once you have a knowledge base. Anyway, so let's look at this. We're going to look at August 28th, 2014. Remember, we couldn't find anything in the numerology from the time he took office, but here's the riddle, right? This is all about the coup d'etat attempt in 2016. Notice how this started 98 weeks in 1 day into his time, right? 98 weeks in 1 day. Remember, the president or the prime minister of Jordan had been in office for 98 weeks in 1 day on the date of this story about Michael Jordan. And we know that beast equals 198. Well, if you measure from the coup d'etat to the date of the news story from Turkey, you get 198 weeks exactly. And remember, his common name with the English character added back in equals 66 and 666. Oh, and think about the coup d'etat attempt. It was in the year 2016. When you multiply 6 times 6 times 6, you get 216. So you better believe that whole coup d'etat attempt was just a show. It was all a joke. Nothing was really in danger there at the Turkish government. Also, there's more about Jordan, the nation of Jordan. I want to point out how Jordan's full name is the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan equals 244. This news story about Jordan on the date leaving 244 days in the year. And look at Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, 24 letters, 4 words. The 404 also lines up with numbers from the story from Turkey too. I'm not going to get too deep into that because it's already confusing, but man, when you know Gematria, your head can really spin in circles, and sometimes it's just better to know when to put it down, right? All right, guys, I'm tired of talking. It's been almost 2 hours. I hope you guys enjoyed this live stream, got a lot out of it. I noticed the number of viewers kept creeping up throughout the entirety of the presentation, so I'm glad that some of you were hooked. You know, I never really do too many instructional videos, describing my thought process, but, because there's no shortcut, and that's not what people want to hear. Like, if I was to teach you a language, it would take months, right? Or years, depending on which language you're trying to learn. Even if you're a great learner, you got to be some sort of special fella to where, you can learn a language in like a week or something. That's not in the realm of possibility for most people. And Gematria is a language. It's a language of numbers and letters. And it's different than any language that we're familiar with, but I think at a core level it makes sense to more people than others. It certainly makes a lot of sense to me. A while ago I told a story about how when I was like 5 or 6, I would introduce myself as 43 because my name, Derek, equals 43. And it wasn't until later in life I realized that I did that, thinking, wow, here I am teaching Gematria now after all these years. So, just trying to build this knowledge base because, again, this work is not going to go viral anymore. It was, I think, early 2018 was the last that we saw Gematria ever go viral, at least on my channel, and now it's squashed. So we have to try and spread the knowledge so that the next generation of decoders can better understand this. And hey, maybe we'll get to a point where we can get completely ahead of everything and start predicting things, right? And we already are able to predict some things. I mean, that's no secret. But how great would it be like to say, hey, on this date, we think we're going to see Jordan and Turkey in the news. There's like a 99% chance or something. Or the country that will be in the news today, like the top 2% of countries will be here. And then sure enough, you see 3 of them in the news. How great would that be, right? So that's kind of what I'm trying to get at. And it's going to take someone smarter than me, but, I'm working at it too. So again, special shout out to everybody who jumped in. Peace, love, God bless. Stay strong. Again, it's tough times. We're losing friends because, they don't want to hear this knowledge. They don't want to see the truth. I think a lot of people smell that something is wrong, but they're more afraid to do something about it. To turn to the mainstream media and look for excuses and look for stories to back your reasoning, it's a really cowardly move. I hate to say it, but that's what a lot of people have resorted to, and it's beyond control at this point. Like, they will literally grab for anything, and it's going to become more and more ridiculous to us and more desperate to them. And it's only going to separate us further, and that's just the reality. I hate to say it that way, but we're only seeing the beginning. This is going to be a long, tough decade. It's going to test each and every one of us. But if we pass these tests, if we don't give in to fear, don't give in to these satanic cult and what they want us to think, we will come out of this better. It can happen. The future is not set in stone. We, as people who are aware of what is going on, can reverse this spell. And part of that is simply despelling. I don't necessarily believe in practicing number magic yourself. I think you're playing with fire at that point, and you're going to end up getting burned whether you like it or not. But by spreading love, which is the polar opposite of the fear that they want us to, again, we can come out of this alive, and for the much better. So I hope we do, and I really believe that we will. All right, guys. Peace, love, God bless. We'll talk to you next time. See ya!